I have heavily invested into Luminar Technologies because I think this stock is extremely undervalued and I think it will 50x by 2030, but with such high reward there is also a lot of risk. So here is my complete analysis of Luminar Technologies, everything from its products, business plan, future potential and risks to upcoming catalysts, all combined in one single video. Luminar Technologies, with a stock ticker LAZR, makes LiDAR sensors. LiDAR, which stands for light detection ranging, sends out laser light, which is then reflected from the objects back to the sensor. The system then uses time of flight of the reflected light to develop a distance map of the objects and surroundings. This technology is useful in tons of different industries, from military and defense to agriculture, but this company currently focuses on autonomous vehicles. As we all know, the global mobility sector is increasingly focused on safety and autonomy, but instead of trying to go straight to robotaxis, this company has taken the approach of building technology to first enhance rather than replace the driver in the vehicle. LiDAR is useful for level 2 autonomy, which means partial driving automation, and it's necessary for level 3 autonomy and beyond, because at least in my opinion, cameras alone will never be enough to achieve full autonomy at high speeds, especially during the night or heavy rain. The company was founded in 2012 and now it has over 800 full-time employees. It has 208 awarded patents, which is more than all of their competitors, and the first and only LiDAR technology made standard on a global production vehicle, with that vehicle being the new Volvo EX90. But the company doesn't just make LiDAR sensors, they also make semiconductors and software for their systems. That includes still in development perception decision-making software, as well as high-definition 3D mapping that will make them more and more money as time goes on. Additionally, they're working on Luminar Insurance, which is expected to accelerate the adoption of Luminar's LiDAR technology. They've made product decisions to meet the needs of highway speed autonomy and maximum safety, which is why they had to develop custom components from the chip level up, eventually developing LiDAR with 1550 nanometers wavelength, which is way more advanced than most of their peers who developed LiDAR with lower wavelength. The 1550 nanometers wavelength won't cause eye damage, it has better range, resolution and is more robust across various solar and weather conditions. Their technology roadmap to mass adoption began in 2017 with a Model G series built for proof of concept. In 2019 they made Hydra built for test and development. In 2022 they've made the Iris built for series production. This exact sensor is currently in the Volvo EX90. Then they've made the Iris Plus, which will be put into Mercedes CLA model coming this year, and in 2026 they expect to deliver Halo built for scale and mass adoption. The Halo especially is a sensor that's going to be far ahead of the competition. Firstly, it's half the size and third the volume of the Iris, and most importantly it solves two main criticisms of LiDAR, the so-called LiDAR bump and the cost. Halo can be integrated into the roofline of the car with just 16mm or 0.6 inches sticking out. On top of that, it can even be integrated behind the windshield with limited effect to performance and no additional coefficient of drag. And secondly, the Halo is expected to be half the price of the Iris. On top of that, Matthew Wheat, the senior director of product at Luminar, gave us a couple of additional reasons in the recent Q&A why the Halo is so much further ahead than the competition. Firstly, it has more range performance than everybody else, with centimeter level precision over 300 meters away. But in his words, the biggest differentiator is that their LiDAR is actively cooled. You see, everybody else is using passive cooling, which causes a performance drop at high temperatures because you have to drop laser power or make fewer measurements to cool the sensor. But Luminar is the only LiDAR provider which can actively cool its sensor. Not only that, it can also heat it up for defrosting, meaning that its sensor can work in various weather conditions. With their products, they've been able to get some quite well-known partners like Nvidia, Mobileye and Qualcomm, and major car companies as customers. Their Iris LiDAR is already on an all-electric Volvo EX90. Either the Iris or the Iris Plus will be on the Volvo ES90 being revealed in March, and the Halo is speculated to be on the EX60, but that's further down the line. Mercedes-Benz plans to integrate Iris Plus into the CLA electric model being revealed in March. On top of that, the Iris Plus was spotted in the new Mercedes S-Class, but since that car is likely going to be released a bit later, it's more likely to have Halo instead of Iris Plus. Polestar is going to integrate Luminar's technology on the Polestar 3, 4 and 5 as an option, with the LiDAR becoming becoming available in this year. The company has also been working with Nissan for a couple of years, and in the Q3 earnings report, Luminar struck a new advanced development contract with a major Japanese automaker. That could just be Nissan, but given the fact that they have mentioned Nissan by name multiple times in the past, I think it's likely either Toyota or Honda. Luminar also supplies LiDARs for a relatively new company that is currently small but could become much larger. Kodiak Robotics is developing so-called sensor pods for trucks. Each sensor pod has an iris LiDAR and they put two sensor pods on one truck. They provide the software necessary for autonomous driving combined with the sensor pods to trucks, pickup trucks and military vehicles. As of now, they have already delivered first customer-owned autonomous robot trucks to Atlas, a company which has already completed the delivery of 100 loads with its two robot trucks. Currently, these trucks are fully autonomous on private roads, but once they get approved for full autonomy in highways, well, I think every single trucking company will want to replace human drivers with autonomous trucks which can drive non-stop. So the potential market for autonomous trucks and consequently Luminar's LiDAR here is massive. Luminar also provides LiDARs for Mobileye, a much larger company focused on making systems that enable partially and fully autonomous cars. Its chauffeur platform has one Luminar LiDAR and its drive platform has 3 Luminar LiDARs, but from 2026 onwards Luminar's competitor InWiz will sadly start providing LiDARs for the drive platform. I honestly don't know why would Mobileye switch to an inferior LiDAR for their drive platform and keep Luminar's LiDAR for their chauffeur platform when Luminar's LiDAR is way slimmer and already works on their drive platform. Mobileye plans to commercially launch chauffeur and drive platforms in 2027, so quite a lot of time will have to pass before we see major revenue from Mobileye coming to Luminar. Additionally, Luminar provides LiDARs to Pony AI, which makes robot taxis. Luminar was also selected to be part of Nvidia's Hyperion platform back in 2021, and they've been working with them closely ever since. The senior director of product said that getting selected for these platforms is first and foremost a good endorsement and validation of their technology. More importantly though, the primary benefit of being on a reference platform is that when these players quote the ADS or AV compute and or software business for a production program, they recommend to the automakers how to configure those vehicles from a hardware perspective to best enable the functional product. And while the automakers will ultimately choose how to equip their vehicles based on their own preferences, selecting the hardware from the reference platform is generally the easiest, quickest and least expensive way to commercialize. And exactly that is why Volvo, Mercedes and Polestar are going to use Nvidia's chips in combination with Luminar's LiDAR. All these partnerships made their product the only industrialized LiDAR launched and standardized on a global production vehicle. Now let's cover the final part of Luminar's business, Luminar Semiconductor. It's made out of several companies which Luminar acquired in the past years: Black Forest Engineering, Optogration, Freedom Photonics and EM4. This side of the business focuses on building chip-scale photonic solutions to solve optoelectronic problems. Basically, it builds the components for their LiDARs and it also makes semiconductors for external companies. With over 150 customers worldwide, Luminar Semi provides advanced semiconductor solutions to global leaders in optical communications, industrial and gas sensing, and satellite and space photonics. In other words, this market is already huge and is expected to continue to grow. Currently, Luminar Semiconductor generates only about $20 million a year, but it could substantially grow in the future. It's kind of hard to estimate by how much it could grow because it all depends on whether they can expand their market share. But in worst case, it gives Luminar a competitive advantage as it owns its entire LiDAR and semiconductor supply chain. If you've made it so far and are enjoying the video, I would like to ask you to like the video because it really helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. The technology and the market is here. The only thing lacking are the company's financials because the long-term risk is bankruptcy. You see, the company has a lot, and I mean a lot of debt, at least when you compare it to its cash reserves. That debt will mature in 2026 and 2030, meaning that the company will have to pay a part of its debt in 2026 and a part in 2030. To pay that debt, the company needs to start generating more revenue and lower its costs. The CFO said that they have enough liquidity to survive until at least the end of 2026, meaning that if that's true, the long-term downside in 2 years is bankruptcy and a full 100% loss. Now, I've done my own calculations based on how much liquidity they have and how much I expect them to lose in Q4. With them having $200 $230 million in cash and liquidity, and with my estimation of their operating cash flow loss dropping to about $40 million in Q4, it would give them about 5 to 6 quarters or until mid-2026 before they run out of money. This is assuming that their loss doesn't decrease in the future with the upcoming revenue growth. On top of that, the CFO said that the company needs an additional $100 million to get to profitability. Later, he said that this number is likely going to be way lower. Not zero, but lower than $100 million. They could potentially get that funding by doing a dilution, so this is another risk you have to keep in mind. Having that said, I think that bankruptcy, although possible, is unlikely. You see, car manufacturers do a lot of due diligence on their suppliers, especially on suppliers of key components like LAZR on one of their main vehicles like the Volvo CX-90, not even counting in the upcoming Kia S90 and the new Mercedes models, which is why I find it more likely that one of these car manufacturers would buy out Luminar in the case of bankruptcy. Now let's look at Luminar's valuation and its competitors' valuation to see whether the company is currently undervalued or not. Right now it has a market cap about $220 million while generating $75 million of revenue, meaning that its PS ratio is around 2.7, which is lower than other LiDAR companies like LAZR with 4.23, Microvision with 33.77, Innoviz with 4.59, AIVA with 27.37 and Hesai with 9.2. Hesai is a Chinese company and in my opinion extremely overvalued, while the rest are Western companies. That's important because even though Hesai seems like a strong competitor to Luminar, it really isn't due to security concerns. Otherwise, we can see that Luminar is trading at the lowest valuation out of all these companies except Innoviz, despite generating more revenue than Innoviz, Microvision and AIVA combined, resulting in an extremely low PS ratio. The only reason why Luminar is trading so low is that it currently has the lowest gross margin and more debt than cash. On top of that, Luminar is the most shorted LiDAR company out of all of these, with a short percentage of float being 30%. The stock is so heavily shorted that it's been added to the SHO list, which means that more than 0.5% of all outstanding shares are naked shorts. Honestly, Luminar is trading like it's going bankrupt in a couple of months, which is why I think this presents an incredible buying opportunity if you believe that it's not going to go bankrupt. Now onto the upside. The ramp up of production of the Volvo EX90 is in my opinion going to have a massive effect on the next earnings report. This includes the months of October, November and December. We already have Volvo EX90 sales numbers for all of these months, which doesn't mean how many cars have been manufactured but how many have been sold. Anyway, in October they have sold 362 cars, in November 744 and in December 475. A lot of Luminar's future depends on the ramp up of production of cars that have their LiDAR, which is why I'm closely following the EX90 sales numbers. And the January sales numbers jumped to 992, which is more than half of the cars they sold in 2024. The current sales numbers would put the Luminar's revenue in Q4 from this car to about $1.6 million if we assume that they have produced the exact number of cars as they have sold. Luminar's total Q4 revenue would be around $17 million, which doesn't seem that much more than Q3 revenue, and it's not. But there are two tiny details in the company's Q3 presentation that makes the Q4 earnings report potentially even better. Firstly, they have already produced enough sensors in Q3 to fully service Q4 demand, which means that their gross loss should drastically reduce due to production downtime in Q4 to help reduce their inventory levels. And while we can't make an accurate estimate of how much money they'll save from production downtime, we can look at the second crucial point in the report. In September, they took additional cost-saving actions under the restructuring plan. They expect those actions to generate $80 million in annual cash savings or $20 million saved in each quarter. From Q2 to Q3, their operating cash flow loss already reduced by $22 million. But in my opinion, it's highly unlikely that the full extent of actions taken in September, the last month of Q3, are shown in the Q3 report. I believe a maximum saving of $8.5 million was realized in Q3, leaving $11.5 million to be realized in Q4, meaning that operating cash flow loss, which was $78 million in Q2, $56 million in Q3, should reduce to at least $45 million in Q4. When you add the savings from production downtime, we could get to a $40 or $35 million loss. These two things, the increase in revenue and decrease in loss, is in my opinion going to be a major positive catalyst for this stock. But even more important is the guidance for 2025, because that will give us a very clear picture of how close to bankruptcy is the company actually. As for the long-term picture, when Volvo fully ramps up production of the EX90, we can expect about 7,000 sales per month, which equates to about 84,000 sales a year, meaning that Luminar would generate about $84 million of revenue from this car model alone. If we simply add this revenue to the revenue they're already generating, we go from $70 million of revenue to about $154 million of revenue, not even counting in the revenue growth from other sales. With the same price to sales ratio, which is currently way lower than other LiDAR companies, we get a market cap of $115 million. That's about a 2x potential in just a year. Now the company is planning to release their new LiDAR called Luminar Halo in 2026, which they plan to sell for half the price of the current LiDAR Iris, so for about $500 per unit. Either the Iris or the Halo is going to be put on the ES90, the EX60 will likely have the Halo, the Mercedes CLA will have the Iris Plus, and future Mercedes models probably the Halo. For the production of these models, the company will have to survive for longer than just until the end of 2026, so everything from here on is pure speculation. If we assume that the ES90 will sell a bit less than the S90, we get about 24,000 units a year, which equates to about $12 million of revenue for Luminar, and the EX60 selling a bit less than the XC60 would give us about 180,000 units a year, which equates to about $90 million of revenue for Luminar. With the Mercedes CLA selling about 60,000 units a year, it would bring in about $60 million, and the S-Class selling about 10,000 units a year would bring in about $5 million, bringing the total revenue to about $300 million by 2027. If we assume that none of the 15 to 20 other car models will go into production by then. With the same PS ratio, that's a market cap about $110 million, making a 4x potential. But what I'm most excited about Luminar in the distant future is their software. With more and more cars with their LiDAR on the road, currently at least 1,106 Volvo cars, they collect more and more data, which will allow them to directly deliver certain self-driving functions to car manufacturers. With this software, they even expect to generate more revenue from 2030 onwards than from actual sales of the sensor. We have an estimated 197 million units total addressable market in 2030, and if we speculate that Luminar's LiDAR captures just 2% of this market, it would equate to around $2 billion of revenue. If we also assume that Luminar makes $2 billion more from their software, we get $4 billion. And once again, with the same PS ratio, the market cap would be $10.8 billion, making a 50x potential. But once again, everything I've just said is pure speculation, and the company could very well go bankrupt by the end of 2026 or earlier. But as I said, since they already have their LiDAR on a car of a major car brand, I find it more likely that one of these car manufacturers would buy out Luminar. In this scenario, the downside is no 100% loss anymore, but there could even be an upside given the extremely low market cap. The most important upcoming catalysts are the Q4 earnings at the end of February, followed by the Volvo ES90 and the Mercedes CLA debut in March. Then we'll likely have Luminar Day in April, and in mid-2025, Volvo's LiDAR will probably go live, followed by Polestar 3 with LiDAR as an option getting available to order. If you want to see my portfolio updates as soon as I write them, get notifications when I buy or sell a stock, and see my whole up-to-date research on the stocks I'm holding, like Luminar Technologies, weeks before I make a video, you can subscribe to my Patreon by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Having said all that, this is purely for entertainment purposes, as I'm not a financial advisor, and if you want to see more of my content, click on the video just popped up. If you like my content, make sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching.